Hey folks, thanks very much and welcome to another episode of Borderless Commerce. I'm here again with my co-host AJ. Amazing to be here, and we actually, AJ and I, to our credit, we have managed to get hold of someone really amazing, Sam Cole. Sam Cole is someone who, again, is doing a lot of behavioral commerce and beyond. Sam, welcome to the podcast,
Thanks for
and
having
we
me.
are very glad and excited to have you.
Happy to be here.
AJ and I, folks, you already know what we do, but I'm gonna basically do otherwise. AJ is gonna basically do a hit on me. I would want to basically live maybe 7-8 more decades. I didn't do the maths there, but anyway, I'll take whatever comes.
7 more decades will get you to 110.
Yeah, I think
You're 40, aren't you?
I kind of
90.
He's late 40, anyway.
okay, and I said 7-8 decades, right? So
right, yeah.
Anyway, I'm again doing the maths.
You're already
So,
old. You want to get really, really old. Anyway.
See, folks, the way now AJ confronted me on this topic, just an innocent mistake there, right? So you could trust me when I say he's going to basically go up, have a hit on me. So I want to avoid that. AJ, someone who is there helping the businesses. I know AJ for now years, and he is a growth guru, working on the commerce, living, breathing, and helping businesses around that. So again, I'm going to keep your introduction brief, AJ. Is that okay, or do you want me to sing the praises?
No, I think.
Okay, so the main course, right? So we have, as I was saying, someone amazing. Sam Cole, he is someone who leads or has been leading multidisciplinary teams, and he does something very interesting, that's behavioral sciences. And using his expertise on the topic, he has built a strong track record of designing, implementing, evaluating real-world experiments, observational studies, pilots, interventions that foster behavior change, and then basically businesses could leverage those projects led by Sam to their benefit, and those benefit advantages are immense. So I was going through his profile and I was really impressed. Enterprises, big companies like Humana have been, taking advantage of what Sam has to offer to the industry. And, again, his CV is very impressive. He's worked with expert clinicians, data scientists, engineers, business leaders, whole 9 yards. So, Sam, again, welcome to the podcast and thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. So, Sam, and now the envy part, right? I'm going to basically start with two feelings, two emotions that I have. One is I'm really envious of beautiful hair that you have on your scalp. I mean, I never had that opportunity to grow these, right? Somehow, since my teens, I wanted to grow them. I didn't have a good set of hair. So, and my wife is, she's a PhD in education psychology, so psychologist. I'm kind of, the second emotion is in this reference that I'm a bit scared of people who are good with psychology, behavioral studies.
Don't worry, he's not going to ask you how it makes you feel.
Okay, I'll cross that one off. Sorry.
So anyway, so two emotions being put on the table. We're gonna basically get right into it. Right. So Sam, applied social psychology. And behavioral sciences. Why? Why?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, let me say, just to go back 1 second, I cannot grow a beard like you have. All right, Hammad. Like, I'm very jealous of your facial hair. Mine, from my Irish ancestry, won't allow me to do that very compellingly, so I had to go the other direction. Why?
Good to know. Good to know. Again, that behavioral sciences thing, that's hitting me, right? I'm more scared now.
Oh, more scared. Okay, sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. So why behavioral science? So it's a good question. I've always been interested in bigger questions, right? I was interested in things like, psychology of religion. Why did people make certain decisions one way if they were on their own, different way when they were maybe in a group or influenced by other people around them? And so getting to where I am today was a bit of an evolution. I don't know if, in terms of a story, I don't know if this resonates with non-US audiences, but there was a line of like pseudo-scientific books that were kind of like stumbled across in the library. And so I was always kind of morbidly curious, like, well, why are people, interested in Bigfoot and in UFOs and all these, like kind of pseudo-scientific topics? And it really like stuck with me. So one way you could put it is I came to behavioral science, right, a way of knowing things related to behavior, because of the opposite, because of pseudoscience around behavior, right? My interest was piqued about these, strange topics that were not scientific, and then grew into just a general curiosity of people's behavior and applying science to understand that. That's the broad start of it. Go ahead.
And I was just going to say, right, so this is very interesting, Sam, that normally, someone would say, I grew up in a farm, I used to look at the stars, and, there was an episode that has happened, my aunt or uncle or a distant cousin, used to behave, suffer in a certain way. And, that kind of, piqued my interest. This is really interesting with pseudoscience, that kind of, made you get into this. This is really interesting. And your understanding of behavioral sciences, how does that basically intersect into the business world? Now, people normally have an understanding on sciences, social, behavioral psychology, etc., and they basically normally go into academia, journalism, all these things. How business, and what value did you see that it can add or solve the problems? What were they?
Sure. So there are a lot of opportunities, simply put, because businesses make decisions via human beings, right? Humans making decisions, that's behavior, that's psychology. And so there's always a behavioral angle, there's always behavioral considerations in any business decision, something very, very risky or something very, very simple and easy. In my career, I've seen a lot of ways that has played out. One of my favorite is around the behavioral science, kind of the topic of confirmation bias, that as human beings, and something probably people know outside of business, as human beings, we tend to pay attention to, remember, retain information that is in alignment with the things that we already think or hope to be true. Okay, so if I think that I have a wonderful head of hair, I will look around to other people and either think like, oh, well, theirs is not as good, or someone who has better hair than me, I just won't kind of pay attention to them. And
is that a possibility? Other people have better hair than you?
Oh, 100%, 100%.
I strongly disagree, sir.
Greener.
I strongly disagree.
The grass is always greener, and so the confirmation bias leads us to in the business environment, essentially biased decisions, right? We take on or believe in untrue assumptions, right? We let information that feels good take precedence in our decision-making processes rather than something that may actually be true. And so that's where the science part comes in. We can get to that too, about that allows us to know what is actually true versus what we feel is true.
And this is very interesting now when you say that how do we want a piece of information to be true, right? Our own biases kind of kicking in. And when you look around in the business sphere, you see a lot of businesses struggle with data-backed kind of, interpretations, decisions. I mean, is that the only singular reason, or it could be, broken systems or culture, that kind of a thing, Sam?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, all of it plays in, and I've seen it all like throughout my career. The culture component I do find to be very interesting. I mean, maybe my experiences at Humana will be kind of a good frame to tell the story here. So when thinking about data-backed decisions, right? Data tends to be almost agnostic, right? You can have numbers, you can measure something, you have data on a thing, on a behavior, on an outcome, on an ROI, what have you. But that data may not give you the right information to make a decision. It may not be good evidence, okay? And so I've always talked with my partners, clients, etc., to try and make evidence-based decisions rather than just data-driven, because data can also be misleading, right? You can have spurious correlations, right? We all know correlation is not causation, right? We can measure ice cream sales and we can measure shark attacks, and we can say, oh, they both go up at the same time, but ice cream sales doesn't cause sharks to attack people. It's people go to the beach, right? It's weather, it's temperature, it's the seasons. So I've always pushed my decision-making partners, my clients, to make those evidence-based decisions, to think broader and more thoughtfully about the data they have, separate the wheat from the chaff in a way. I've had leaders tell me that we have all of this data and all of it is gold, right? It's just everything. And I was like, well, that's pretty dangerous, because you could have your ice cream, your shark attack data in there, but that would lead you to, I don't know, make a bad decision about ice cream sales if you want to reduce shark attacks in that case. You have to take into context the broader context of where you're getting the data, how it's measured, and then what it actually means in the real world. I like the culture question as well. One of the ways that I've told my clients, my partners at Humana and elsewhere, to try and improve this decision making, it can be cultural. So I'm thinking of like product and innovation teams. Like we're going to allocate resources to this team to develop a feature that is going to make things better. That team is incentivized for that feature to work. It has to work, otherwise, I don't know, they've failed, they have feelings of failure, inadequacy, all of those things, and maybe even their livelihood is tied up with the success of it, versus learning whether or not that feature, that innovation, worked or did not work. Is that a clear distinction? Yeah. So having it be incentivized to work and only work, in which there is a culture of that fosters confirmation bias. Any data that shows, oh, there might be a benefit here, that's going to be the information that's going to be indexed to, versus, well, if we're just trying to learn, does this work? Does this not work? Then positive and negative findings, they can be treated with equal weight. And so the culture can influence the direction that the organization will go.
So Sam, this is interesting, and maybe I'm getting a little, creative in terms of my line of questioning. So the experimentation in data, right? Organization, leaders, decision makers, at times, we as, senior or, business leads and teams, etc., we tend to take those decisions where we're just allowing the space to experiment, without putting up any data-backed or success-backed kind of a goal, right? And because and then we end up saying, oh, we encourage experimentation, there's a culture and all those things, but there is something missing around there. And I've seen that so many times. How do you crack that when you're talking to these teams, business leaders, etc.? I mean, I'm really interested to know.
Yeah, I think it depends, as with everything. But I have found one thing to be successful that has cracked it for a few teams. And that has been in essentially having the decision pre-made. So before the experiment is done, before the data is collected, you walk through your assumptions. What is the benefit? What is the change that this intervention, new feature is going to have? You have your measurements, you have your plan, and then you say, okay, well, if it hits this number, this is the decision I'm going to make. Versus if it hits this number, this is the decision we're going to make. So having that that culture of predetermining your decision based on what the evidence will show you, that can really help. Because in that case, then the evidence that comes through, the data that comes through, is not then it's not put on as equal footing as other components of the decision in terms of like seniority, right? There are people in a room, and a senior leader is like, well, I have a relationship with this new vendor, right? And I think that they have some merit. We should try it, despite the fact that the evidence came back and maybe said, let's hedge that a little bit. So I have seen that predetermination of a course based on the evidence. I've seen that help make more evidence-backed decisions. Does that answer your question?
What I'm hearing you say, and I'm going to be the idiot in the room now, is it's about trying to define what best behaviour looks like. Is that the rubber, or am I barking at the wrong tree?
In a way, it's more. I hesitate to say that like the key is just how we think deeply about everything, because we can't do that. Like we're not. Yeah. We don't have unlimited cognitive or financial resources. But if you can think through a problem to the point of where you're going to make the decision, and then say, okay, this is the decision we're going to make. We're going to go with it. If it comes this way or this way, then I think that is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's helpful, because I think I spend a lot of time talking about KPIs and OBRs, right? And for me, they outline what best behaviour should look like, or the behaviour we're we aspire to be like, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that is kind of helpful in terms of being able to assess, have we hit the mark on this particular metric, or have we missed the mark? And if we've missed the mark, then what is the underlying picture from the more data we can collect that illustrates and fills up the picture, not what the headline number says, but the headline figure can give us that kind of directional push of, are we moving in a cohesive, coherent way towards an outcome that we have agreed is beneficial for what we're doing strategically, but at the same time it's not something that's set in stone. It's we're trying to find what activities underneath contribute to producing a better number, which then produces a better outcome overall.
Yes, and that's where I get into the kind of
it's very nuanced.
Cultural. Oh no,
very nuanced.
100%. I mean, like we're covering a lot of different things. We're saying like we're touching on the kind of the reliability and the validity of the measure as well. It's just like, are we measuring? Yeah, are we measuring the behavior correctly? Like, does click on a cart actually measure intent to purchase? Right? I don't know. Like you can go back and forth. But then you get into the kind of the culture of experimentation within an organization, and how that very nuanced, complicated process also plays out. Because, then you can, if you have a robust experimentation culture, you're treating almost everything as tentative, right? It's it's not like, oh, this thing that I'm bringing to the table, it might be real, it might not be, and we're going to test it and find out. And so we can pivot, move quickly, based on the data, based on the evidence.
Yeah.
So Sam, when you're saying measuring the measuring, right? So measure the measure, parameters, etc. Now, for me, whatever, based on my learnings, experience, or maybe, snake oil kind of a salesperson, whoever has put that measuring thing in my head, that's my holy grail, right? And I'll keep doing some experimentations to basically hit that measuring standard, whatever that might be. When and how do I get to basically see that, my measurement standard is pretty bad? Because, it takes a lot of time for me to be able to see, and especially, when you're in the medium and large businesses, they still are making money, some kind of money, but they do not realize how much money they are losing for a very long time because they had their measurement parameter wrong. How does that happen?
It's death by thousand cuts. Is what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. We've seen so many of bigger companies. I know. Assuming all three of us, I think we are at that stage. We have seen Nokia, and we understand the greatness of that company too, right? Looking and reading about that, that's a different thing, but we have lived through that time, and now we see what that organization, great company, has become as of today. So, but now measurement, and I'm also saying with this example, Nokia, they must have had very good measuring parameters being set, but clearly someone's measuring wrong. So how does that happen? Bigger companies, folks like me, how does that basically happen? What should be the red flag?
What should be the red flag? Well,
you could answer in your own way. It doesn't have to be the red flag thing in terms of, one sentence. I'm not looking for that. I'm just trying to understand. How should I think? How should a business leader think? A commerce before realizing after losing a lot of money.
Yeah, no, I love the term red flag. I use it often. I use it in the French classes I'm taking right now. I also like the term snake oil, and I'd love to return to that at some point as well. But the measurement question, in my experience, I have seen independent measurement as a kind of a check or a solution to bad measures or bad data or bad evidence, right? It's kind of like that third party component, something that I'm hoping to give to my clients these days. And I saw this at a lot of businesses. I'm going to go back to Humana. Large organization, they want to invest in solutions rather than build those solutions often. And so my team and we got to see a large portfolio of vendors, products, pitches of things that they all believed worked, right? I'm taking these people at these businesses at face value and saying, we got a 300% ROI with this intervention. Okay, as a behavioral scientist, tell me more. Like, how did you measure that? How did you get there? Oh, you just looked at like day 1 and day 30, and that was how you got to 300%? Well, or maybe let's say a day, like 2 years later, and it's like, oh, well, the pandemic ended. So maybe that was the reason that you got 300% ROI, because the comparison, the evidence was suspect. And so in that case, it was the objective look at the measure that helped put that in check. So I know not every organization can develop a large team of behavioral scientists or statisticians, et cetera, to really do that. But I think that there are a lot of very simple questions that you can ask in those kinds of situations or in your own situation around the assumptions that go into the measures and the data that you're collecting, the checks and balances that are also going into it. Like, what are my preconceived notions? What do I hope to be true? I love a vendor that would come to me and say, here is our randomized comparison group, right? Our randomized control group, right? If they were able to do a real A/B test and not something that was compromised, that was a positive signal in my mind. And if they weren't doing that, they couldn't identify a good counterfactual, a good A/B test. That was often a red flag.
That makes so much of sense, and I'm gonna say, the fans. I'm not sure about you. If you're a fan of Breaking Bad, and then it had a spin-off, Better Call Saul, and that guy was a snake oil salesman kind of a person, right? So he planted someone to have his legal practice go up, and the planted person asks, "You must be very expensive." So I'm not going to ask you that, but what exactly is the engagement model, right? What exactly, in maybe an academic way, what exactly should be an ideal engagement model when a business basically involves someone like you, a business who could provide that services, right? So, and you must be very expensive, Sam.
I like to think so.
For this call?
Yeah. So it depends, and I think the expensive point, I know it's a joke, but it's still a very good one. The beauty, I think, of behavioral science and just science specifically is that you don't have to over-engineer the solution to a problem, right? I've had discovery calls that resulted in, you know what, you don't need me. Like you've kind of figured it out already. Like, this doesn't need to be tested. This is a low stakes decision, right? I've had other discovery calls that were, oh, you need a team, right? I need to build a team for you. We need to, really embed with your data science, marketing, etc. to do that effectively. So it really depends, and I've really enjoyed that component of my work, that I'm able, using science, the goal is to find out what is true, right? The benefit of that for businesses, the things that are true lead to positive outcomes, right? And if you're able to weed out, like you said, AJ, those things that cause death by 1,000 cuts, by eliminating the things that are not true, everyone wins. So the beauty for me is that I get to present true options to my clients. I can say, this is a very low stakes decision. Go ahead and test the red marketing versus the blue one. That's fine. That'll take a week. No problem. But if you want to build, an AI agent and have that AI agent work within your company, you need to think very thoughtfully about how people interact with this person, this entity. What are their assumptions? What are their preconceived notions? What are their expectations of it? I'm using that example because I don't know that people have cracked that yet. I think that is an ongoing process in the moment. But
there's also
in terms of engaging...
there's also a line point of is AI a sentient being who then deserves respect and deserves a seat at the table, or does it? I know this is a massive tangent, so I'm going to shut up in a second. Or, well, it's another topic for another day.
It could be.
Or is it just a tool that is easily manipulated, and therefore it should be just seen as what we saw our laptops were back in the 80s and Microsoft Word?
That is, I think, the question, and that is something that is also going to change over time as the agents improve. Right? You can talk to. I know development teams that use the AI agent within their development, their coding software, and they treat it pretty simply, right? It probably is similar to a laptop in that situation. I know other businesses that are developing AI coaches, right? Things that are modeled on actual human behaviors, actual human professions. And so I would bring my expectations to that relationship that are probably different than someone else, different from someone else in a different culture who speaks a different language, etc. And all of that, I think, is going to shift and change. You're 100% right, AJ. That is a conversation for 3 other podcasts. But yeah, I didn't get too far off topic.
I thought we've planned the next 4 podcasts, haven't we?
Yeah, exactly. And AJ, the last podcast that we have with Omar, we kind of went that, and Omar almost said the same, probably different words, same thing. We're going to have another podcast and another. So
we'll have to do podcast for podcast, won't we? Get everybody back.
Yeah.
for our long show. Yeah, exactly.
So Sam Call, you were doing outstanding, in your academic kind of life, then moving on into the enterprise and Behemox, then this gig of yours is very, very, very important, and I love the name, by the way, Call Clarity.
Thanks.
So I mean, why the need? What was the inspiration? And what? I don't want to kind of make it a very marketing salesy kind of a question, but again, it's important, right? What do you see unique about you, right, in your engagements, etc.? How does that basically get into play?
Thank you. No, I appreciate it, and I think I can talk about it in a way that is not super salesy. I am a social scientist, so I'm not much of a salesman. Yeah. But the part about that I was talking about of the love and the joy that I have for being able to tell my clients the truth, right? I'm using science, a method of getting to the truth. I've seen so many business leaders, so many business decisions that were suspect at best, right? Like just kind of walking through, well, why did we decide to go this direction? Why did we land here? And in that simple exercise, finding out, oh, here are 2 or 3 flaws in that process that ended up costing either the success of a new feature, a new innovation, or resulted in a costly contract for something that literally could not work because the assumptions were too wrong. So I guess the inspiration for me was, how do I take my expertise of understanding human behavior, my joy of really digging into a problem and then finding those behavioral angles, and democratizing it to my own clients, right? Like, I know that the Amazons of the world, the Walmarts, like the eBays, they have very robust behavioral science teams as a component of their business. And not everyone can afford to have that, right? They can't A/B test every single feature with all of the data at Uber's disposal, right? Or Instagram's. And so I want to do what I can to facilitate decision making in today's business environment, because I like those problems, I like those questions, and I think we can all benefit. I get to kind of nerd out on a problem, and the end goal is measurable, and it should impact the bottom line.
And I got to say, you're a very good looking and very articulate nerd, right? Probably the best in
He's already married.
Class.
He's already married.
I have to thank my wife for all of that.
AJ,
yeah.
Thanks for the disclaimer. So now, Sam, I'm going to ask you this, right? You could expect this AI kind of questions and all those things. Now, this topic has gotten to a point where I kind of start when I'm kind of putting together or getting my head wrapped around that, what should I basically and how should I engage all the experts who are coming to the podcast. I laugh AI, and then I kind of end up putting AI in there. So but this is how important this is, right? So my question primarily is, these days AI, how is this going to influence the behavioral side of things? Now, for example, anything, I have gone personally very suspicious on things. So anything where I see kind of AI attached, anything that looks artificial to me, any graphics or any ad for that matter, which I see that has an AI touch, and you could tell, right? It's not as mature. You could still tell. I run away from that, right? So this is an example where I personally could say that this is how AI has changed my behavior around things. So what exactly is your take on that?
So very astute of you, and yes, that is exactly true. Unintended consequences is the thing that I think about when I think of that, because I feel the exact same way.
Yeah.
I think we all do. AI is very good at like pattern recognition and like doing it, the things that it does. Humans are also very, very, very good at that, right? Like we have developed the senses and the tools to identify meaningful signals, patterns, what should I attend to? What should I be afraid of? What should I eat? All of those things over millennia of evolved behavior and everything. And so launching something into the human ecosystem, people will adapt to it, right? I think back to, I guess, the days of when robo-dialers or auto, like decision trees on you call your insurance company and you get a robot and it's a decision tree. The first time that someone had that, they may have thought, you know what, this is actually very convenient. This is great because it's better than what I was used to. But over time, people habituated to it. They got very used to it. They then got very annoyed by it. Like, I don't want this. I want to talk to a real human being. I think similar things.
That's a good example.
Yeah, similar things are happening to AI, right? Just like you said, Hammad. Anytime I see something that looks like it was generated by ChatGPT in terms of like an image or something, I was like, oh, well, that's not real. A human didn't make that. It's probably a little less trustworthy, would be kind of sometimes my assumption, depending on where you see it. But regardless of what the judgment is, people are bringing new judgments to this new stimuli, to these new tools that are coming out. And that's not always anticipated. In order for a business, for an enterprise to really respond, they have to be ready for and measuring those unanticipated consequences. What happens if people react negatively to this? What happens if they habituate to it? What happens if they go the other direction? So in terms of AI, it's a wild time to be alive, right? To see all of these changes, to see these things grow. I think like AJ touched on before with, is there an agency here? Is there a perceived agency here? Who, not everyone's going to react in the same way to these tools. Who is more likely to engage with some of these things? Who is less likely? How do we change that? How do we deal with it? There's a lot of open questions.
So
change is the only constant.
That's true. Change is the only constant, and the psychology behind that is we're not always very good at pivoting, adapting to that change. Inertia, like psychological inertia, is a real documented phenomenon.
Yeah.
I was listening to something similar conversation about Siri, right? I think there was a news article recently saying that Siri's AI integration has been delayed like another year or two, right? Apple really wants to make sure they get it right. In that conversation, people were talking about, well, I don't use Siri now because when I first used it, it was not good for me. And that behavior, that opinion stuck. It had inertia. And so even if you throw AI into it, there's going to be a certain part of the population that's going to say, but it's Siri. Siri got my alarm wrong once, and so I'm never going to use it.
That's so me.
Or Siri's too complicated to understand what I'm asking it. And I'm a massive nerd like you, and so I have home automation. I have a home automation system, so I have all the curtains, lights. It's fascinating. I can sit for the next 3 hours and talk about it. Nobody ever wants to listen to me talk about it for 3 hours, but they often have that pleasure or displeasure. And oftentimes it's easier to load an app and click 2 buttons than to say, Siri, can you do this, that, and the other? And I think I often think about friction in terms of whether it's process implementation, process design, or getting somebody to take an action. And what is the friction? And I think you're absolutely spot on, Sam. I don't think enough people think in those terms and think, well, is there too much friction involved in what we're trying to get the outcome versus how great the tech is.
100%. I think in terms of like some of the learnings from behavioral economics, behavioral science, I think that inertia and friction are two of the biggest, right? I had a coworker express it to me in an interesting way. The computer system would always say, like, do this step so that it would update your computer or whatever. It was like 2 clicks, but that was an additional friction in his day, and he would go out of his way to avoid that friction. He would probably do more things to avoid that friction because that's just what we do. We want things to be simple. We want things to be easy. I do think, like, some of AI's biggest success stories right now are the things that we don't know it's doing. Like, it's filtering our spam. I don't have to do anything. There's no friction there, but it does a great job. It's very useful. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think all of us, we could agree that this will have a serious impact on the consumer behavior, right? But maybe we can predict some, we cannot, of course, predict the others. But and AJ, I would want your input in this too, right? Both of your opinion on this. That what do we, as again, business owners, we as business leaders, how do we basically future-proof our business, right? So that we do not become another Nokia's, the Xerox, or whoever. What do we need to do? What kind of a framework or culture that we need to basically build, integrate into our systems, culture, teams, etc.? What exactly do we need to do?
You want to take that first, AJ?
Sure, of course. I'll take that softball question. I think it's about trying to separate the macro and the micro. So I don't think we can solve the macro problems. So the change from the BlackBerry to the iPhone, I don't think anyone could predict that in a very large sense, right? Because I remember getting on the tube when I was 21, 22, and lots of people were using BlackBerries. The next year when I was 22, 23, on the tube, people were using iPhones, right? And it's because it made everything easier for them. And I don't think that you can predict those sorts of seismic changes. I think in the case of something like Nokia, I think there's lots of micro changes in the market that led to their demise. And I think the way you bias for micro changes is you keep listening to the market, you keep listening to your customers. And that sounds like asinine advice, and that sounds like really obvious advice, but I know so many businesses that I consult with, or people that I talk to who run small businesses, and I said, so when was the last time you actually talked to your customers about what they're struggling with? Oh, well, we know that because we're in business. And I go, well, no, that's not what I've asked. I've asked, how often do you actually go and talk to your people and say, what are you actually learning, what are you seeing, what's happening out there? And I think by doing that and by being resolute in this idea that you are in business to make money and you can go do your fancy hobbies outside of it, right, the artistic element, if you like, that you can stay resolute on this idea that you're doing things that customers desire and want and are willing to pay for, and that drives you having this work-life balance or this hobby time for you to go do this artistic stuff that makes them money and nobody wants but you are passionate about. But you have to do one to get the other. So I think that's how I kind of separate it out, and that's how I think is, I don't think humanly we can overcome some of these big seismic changes, but I think realistically we can overcome some of these micro changes that we're not actually engaging in an ongoing or a daily basis that actually are fundamentally important for us, for our survival, and actually aren't that scary or that divisive to overcome or to face head on.
Yeah, I like a couple of things you said in there, AJ, that kind of touch on like the inertia component. Like, I think of the Xerox example as well, Hammad, of like we are holding on to our business model. It's going to get us through, and that inertia just carried them, to missing the boat on digital cameras, right? So that behavioral inertia in the C-suite, in the decision making, can be problematic. So that's where I try and insert that experimentation mindset, keeping a kind of a light grip on the things you think you know, right? And then AJ, like you said, having a robust feedback pipeline of what are your customers thinking, how are they behaving, how is that changing? Like we said with AI, it's going to be changing in ways that we cannot anticipate. And it's going to be changing so rapidly that you really need to have a good understanding of people's behavior. Is it too simplistic to say that? But your own customers' behavior.
And then building and putting together a proper tech stack, expertise, team, and making it part of whatever your growth goals are, making it a proper formalized thing that you've got to do every week, every month, every QBR. So that make a lot of sense. Sam, right now, how is Coal Clarity doing? What's the framework of the company? How do you work? I mean, so this is an excellent conversation, right? And I would want that, if I want to reach out to you or anyone who's interested, how do they basically reach out to you?
Simply coalclarity.com, right? So I have my website up, and I've got a few projects coming through there right now. We're working on the beauty of, again, sorry, I keep on going back to beauty and joy, but the beauty of behavioral science.
Keep going back to beauty and joy, please.
Please.
I agree. I think it's necessary. Human behavior is a through line in a lot of industries. We're trying to get people to do something. We're trying to understand that behavior. And so, we've got a couple projects in Q2. We have a little bit more room. So if anybody, wants to reach out to this quarter, there's a couple slots still open. But yeah, coalclarity.com. There's a contact button there. info@coalclarity.com will get you directly to me. And I'm taking on projects, like I said, from a variety of industries. I've got some healthcare, some marketing partners, one project with kind of like a behavior observed by like CCTV cameras. And so like, how do we understand that in industrial settings and things? So hey, if you want to understand human behavior a little bit better, happy to help.
Absolutely. And folks, if you reach out to me, AJ, we'll be happy to put you in touch with Sam. It's a lovely conversation, Sam. We will have that. AJ, am I supposed to say that we will have him again?
We'll absolutely have him again. I think
Thank you.
The idea, as I said before we started recording.
No,
the idea is
sorry, I'm interrupting. Sorry, I'm interrupting. So the question was that am I okay to say that on podcast? On the side offline, of course, we're gonna ask him, make him come to the podcast. No legal issues, right?
No legal issues. I was saying before we hit the record button that we're trying to talk to interesting people and do a number of episodes per person because of what they can bring and what we can talk about, and how a lot of this stuff isn't a 2-minute Snapchat video. It's a more wider, more nuanced conversation, I think. Yeah. Sam is an excellent example of that. I think Umair is as well. So yeah, we're gonna force you to come back to what I'm trying to say, Sam.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd love to. It's been fun.
And probably you're the first person that we actually have said that on podcast. But we're going to bring you back. So Sam, thank you very much for being here. AJ and I, we're both thankful. Had fun, engaged, a lot of learning, and folks, again, we try, AJ and I, we always try bring in the best in class experts on the field. We learn a lot, although we are in the same business, and I hope that, whatever we brought in, that was useful to you too. So till next time, thank you very much, and stay happy. Peace.
Thank you so much.